History of a community can be told in many forms, and in this report we discover a piece of Swift Current's history in a resident's backyard. This picturesque valley on the outskirts of Swift Current appears to be typical ranch land. However, it tells a story dating back thousands of years. Meet Esther and David Green, cattle ranchers in the city's northeast corner. The Greens have been living on this property since 1967 and have always admired the beauty and tranquility of the area. And after one fateful excursion through the valley over 20 years ago, their land was put in the global spotlight.
Well, with our irrigation units, we had to go out twice a day at minimum to look after the sprinklers and move them and this sort of thing. And a lot of that we did off a horseback. And I would ride by this particular site with the Petroglyph, and this would be early in the morning or late in the evening. You'd have a low sun angle, it would be casting a shadow, and I could see these carvings in the rock. But I just assumed that these were reasonably commonplace and that this rock had carvings and figures on it, but that wasn't unusual until I got talking to some people in the field of archaeology, and they brought Dr. Tim Jones out, the provincial archaeologist, in 1988. And he did some rubbings in the daytime, and lo and behold, in fact, were carvings on the rock.
This initial visit by the provincial archaeologist was followed by colleagues at the University of Winnipeg, who inspected the rock on a more in-depth level.
I guess the next really big step was when Dr. Jack Steinbring and Dr. Tony Buckner from the University of Winnipeg came out here and they did a dig. And when they did the dig, they also found down below the ground, about half a meter, some paintings on the side of the rock. So not only did it have carvings on the surface, it had paintings on the side of the rock. And I think the combination of pictoglyphs and petroglyphs on the same rock, I think that's what triggered the initial interest, or really steeped it.
Now, several years later, and the story of the Swift Current petroglyph is known worldwide through various publications and visitors who are drawn to the site from a historical and cultural perspective, and has been recognized by the province as an actual historic site.
I very definitely, and always have felt when I went by that site, even on a saddle horse, that this was a special spot. And then we would recognize that there were Vision Quest pits. At the time we weren't quite sure what they were. We realized that we had these buffalo bones on the flat down below the pit. That site is not typical Swift Current at all. It's very different. It's a bit of a point, and you feel something different on the site.
A sacred site which the Greens have taken due diligence to preserve, from constructing a fence to keep their cattle and the general public out.
Well, the site is vulnerable to desecration or damage. And like, for example, my two boys running motorcycles off the rock, using it for a ramp, is exactly what we don't want. So we want the site to be protected. And on the other hand, they don't want to put up structures to protect it from the rain, because the experience has been that sites they've covered have been damaged more by dust accumulating, condensation on a glass cover, dripping down and eroding the rock. That sort of thing has caused more trouble than good. So they've concluded that just to leave the site as it is and to document it so that if it does wear down with acidification from rain and that sort of thing in time and dissolve and leave just a bare limestone rock, there at least will be a history of it.
And as the Greens continue to share their knowledge with other history buffs who meet at the Swift Current Museum, their hunger to learn more about the area grows.
Well, I think we want to know where we came from. I think we all have an interest on our own history, and so and the history of the land. The Europeans weren't here, but the Aboriginal people were. And I think it's really important that the Aboriginal people and the Europeans like ourselves, the immigrants, understand the background of the area where we're both sharing, where we're both living. And we really need to appreciate that we weren't the first people here.
Anyone interested in viewing the Swift Current petroglyph is asked to contact the Greens in advance by telephone.